$10,000. That's the fine my new neighbor Karen and her homeowners association decided I owed them for parking my own truck on my own damn land. But she made two big mistakes. First, she picked a fight with the wrong veteran, and second, she had no idea that the man she called to have me arrested was my own son. This isn't just a story about a parking spot, it's a story about lies, corporate greed, and how a dusty old map can bring down a petty kingdom. What would you do in this situation? Tell me your worst HOA story in the comments below. And where are you watching from? After 15 years in the service, where every day was scheduled down to the minute and your life often depended on the guy next to you, all I wanted was the opposite. I craved a life governed only by the sun and the seasons. I wanted silence so deep you could hear your own thoughts. When I found this 50-acre spread nestled in the rolling hills just outside the city's reach, it felt less like a piece of real estate and more like a promise of mornings with no reveille, just birdsong. A promise of nights with no sodium lights, just a thick velvet blanket of stars. I sank every dime of my savings and my severance into this place. It was more than a home, it was a project. A project to see if I could grow roots as deep as the ancient oaks that stood guard at the property line. My ranch isn't fancy. The log house is modest, with a wide front porch, perfect for watching thunderstorms. The big red barn, its paint faded to a soft rust color by decades of sun, leans just a little to the north, as if tired. But it's all mine. The soil here is rich and dark, and the simple act of plunging my hands into it felt like grounding myself back to the real world. The sound of gravel crunching under my truck's tires became my symphony of freedom. The faint, sweet smell of diesel from my old but reliable John Deere tractor was the perfume of self-reliance. This was my sanctuary. My sanctuary bordered a brand new high-end housing development called Willow Creek Estates. When I first bought my land, it was just graded dirt roads and optimistic lot for sale signs. Now, it's a sea of identical beige McMansions, each with a lawn so perfectly manicured and unnaturally green, it looked like it was installed by a giant rolling out a carpet. I didn't mind them. My fences are sturdy and my trees are tall. Live and let live, I figured. That philosophy held for exactly 6 months. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, a pearl white SUV so polished you could check your teeth in the reflection crept down my dirt driveway like it was afraid of getting dusty. It stopped, and out stepped a woman I'd later learn was named Carol, but whose every action, every fiber of her being, screamed Karen. She wore a pink athleisure suit that probably cost more than my ride-on mower, and her blonde hair was sculpted into a motionless aerodynamic helmet. She wasn't here for a neighborly welcome. There was no casserole, no friendly wave. Instead, she marched over, hands on her hips, her posture a billboard of indignation. Her overpowering floral perfume, a chemical sweetness, waged war on the clean country air and lost. "Excuse me," she said, her voice managing to be both loud and thin at the same time, the kind you'd use on an incompetent waiter. "I'm Carol, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. I'm here to inform you that you are in violation of community covenants." I was busy checking a fence post, and I slowly straightened up, wiping my hands on my jeans. I looked at her, then at my truck, then back at her. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm not in your community. My property line is right here." I pointed to the old barbed wire fence. She produced a leather-bound portfolio and flipped it open with a snap. "According to this official plat map," she announced, tapping a manicured finger on a color-printed page, "this 1-acre strip along the road is designated as a Residential Overlay Zone, or ROZ. That means it falls under our HOA's jurisdiction for aesthetic and safety purposes, and we have very strict rules about commercial vehicles being parked in view of the road." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "Ma'am, that's my personal Ford F-250. The only commerce it's involved in is hauling my own groceries. And this is my agricultural land. I went over the survey with a fine-tooth comb before I signed the papers." She gave me a smile that was all teeth, a cold, reptilian thing that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps your paperwork is out of date. This is the new, master-planned community plat. I'm sure it was an oversight on your part." The condescension was thick enough to bottle. "You'll need to move the vehicle immediately. She thrust a piece of paper into my hand. The crisp, unforgiving feel of the violation notice with its official-looking letterhead was the first shot fired in a war I never wanted, but one I sure as hell wasn't going to lose. For a few days, I let the violation notice sit on my kitchen counter, using it as a coaster. I figured it was a power play, a new HOA president trying to mark her territory. I'd seen it in the service 100 times, a new lieutenant, fresh out of officer school, trying to prove he's in charge by inventing solutions to problems that don't exist. I assumed she'd get tired of it when I didn't react. I went about my business, mending fences, tending to my vegetable patch, and soaking up the hard-won quiet. My truck stayed put, a dusty but defiant monument on the strip of land she called the RO's. Then, the first official letter arrived. It was a step up from the notice she'd hand-delivered. This came in a thick cream-colored envelope that felt expensive. The Willow Creek Estates HOA logo was embossed in gold leaf in the corner. It looked less like a warning and more like an invitation to a gala I had no interest in attending. Inside, the language was a masterclass in passive aggression. "Dear property owner," it began. The impersonal address a deliberate slight. It formally demanded I cease and desist all ongoing violations by removing the oversized commercial in nature vehicle from the residential overlay zone. It cited HOA Covenant 7, Section C. Failure to comply within 48 hours would result in a fine of $250, 0 cents. I read it, then I read it again and let out a short, sharp laugh. Commercial in nature? I said to my border collie Buster, who was lying at my feet. What does that even mean? It holds dirt, manure, and the occasional smelly dog. Buster thumped his tail on the floorboards in emphatic agreement. Instead of composing a formal reply or calling a lawyer, I decided to handle it my way. A little defiance, a simple statement of fact. I flipped the heavy, expensive letter over. I took a black Sharpie from a drawer and, in my clearest block letters, wrote a single line on the back. "This is a farm, not part of your HOA. Best regards." I folded it, slid it into a plain white envelope, and the next morning I made a special trip. I drove past the grand gated entrance to Willow Creek. Karen's house was the first one, a massive beige box with a 3-car garage and a lawn that looked like it was maintained by surgeons. I dropped my response into her oversized brick-encased mailbox. I felt a small, satisfying spark of rebellion. I thought maybe, just maybe, a direct, no-nonsense reply would get the message through her perfectly coiffed hair. I was wrong. Karen didn't get messages. She only saw challenges to her authority. She didn't write back. She didn't call. There was just a pregnant silence for about 3 days. On the 4th day, as I was driving out my gate, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Something new. Perched atop the tall brick pillar at the entrance to her own driveway, a gleaming white dome had materialized, a brand new top-of-the-line security camera, its black glass eye aimed with unnerving precision squarely at my parking spot. A tiny red LED blinked with rhythmic malevolence. An unblinking, sleepless eye. That was the mini-twist. She wasn't going to argue, she was going to surveil. This wasn't a disagreement between neighbors anymore. It had escalated. This wasn't going to be a battle of reason. It was going to be a battle of documentation, of photographs, of relentless, invasive scrutiny. I got out of my truck and stared at it, a cold knot forming in my stomach. She had made my home a subject of surveillance. The next morning, I gave the camera a very deliberate one-finger salute on my way out. The presence of that camera changed things. It was a constant, silent hum of hostility in the background of my daily life. It was like having a sniper's scope trained on you, even if you knew the gun wasn't loaded. Yet. I tried to make a joke of it, giving the camera a theatrical bow in the morning, or holding up a particularly large zucchini for its inspection. I thought my humor might unnerve her. The Karen, I was learning, was a creature utterly devoid of humor. Her world was one of rules, violations, and enforcement. A week later, the second letter arrived. This envelope was noticeably thicker, heavier. That knot in my stomach tightened as I tore it open. Inside, it wasn't just a letter. It was a dossier, a stack of glossy photo paper, 6 pages in all. Each page contained a crystal-clear picture of my truck, parked in its usual spot. Each photo was meticulously time-stamped in the corner, a digital record of my defiance. Monday, 7:15 a.m. Tuesday 6:30 p.m., Wednesday high noon. The sense of violation was profound. She wasn't just watching, she was building a case file like a prosecutor. The letter accompanying the photos was as cold as the camera's eye. Due to continued non-compliance with previous warnings, it read, "Your outstanding fine is now $500, 0 cents, $250, 0 cents for the original violation plus a $250, 0 cents recurring penalty for each subsequent 24-hour period." This time, she cited a new rule, Covenant 12, Section A, regarding maintaining the aesthetic and premium character of the community. My dusty Ford, apparently, was a threat to their premium character. My amusement had long since curdled into anger. This wasn't a game. $500, 0 cents was real money. I sat at my kitchen table, the fine and the invasive photos spread out like evidence of a crime. Buster whined and nudged my leg with his nose, sensing the storm brewing in me. This was the point I knew I needed advice from someone with a cooler head. I called my son Mark. He was my pride and joy, a deputy sheriff with the county, a good, steady man with a calmness I'd always admired. I laid out the whole situation for him, from the first conversation to the time-stamped photos. "Dad," he said after a long pause, his voice laced with professional concern, "you gotta be careful. This is what these HOAs do. They use procedural warfare. They have lawyers on retainer and a budget funded by everyone in that neighborhood. They can make your life a living hell with 1,000 paper cuts. Officially, I can't get involved since it's a civil dispute, and I definitely can't look like I'm using my position to help family, but I'll ask around at the county clerk's office, see if anyone's heard of this ROZ designation. It sounds fishy to me." "It's my land, Mark," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "I know, Dad, but being right and proving you're right are two different things. Just be smart about this. Don't give her any more ammunition." Taking my son's advice, though it felt like swallowing broken glass, I decided on a tactical retreat. That evening, I started up the F-250 and moved it deep into my property, parking it out of sight behind the barn. The empty space it left by the road looked like a missing tooth in a smile. It felt like a surrender. And Karen took it as such. The mini twist this time didn't come in my mailbox. It came via a forwarded email from a friendly neighbor in Willow Creek, a guy who bought fresh eggs from me. His note was simple. "Jed thought you should see this. This woman is a piece of work." The subject line of Karen's email blast, "A victory for our community." In the email, Karen triumphantly announced that the ongoing issue of the unsightly commercial vehicle on the adjacent lot had been successfully resolved thanks to her diligence and the robust, unwavering enforcement of our community covenants. She never used my name, but everyone knew. She had made an example of me. She was using me to consolidate her power, to show the other residents that she was the fierce protector of their premium character. Reading those gloating words, I felt the blood start to boil. She didn't just want compliance, she wanted public submission. The game had just gotten a lot more personal. Karen mistaking my tactical retreat for a full-blown surrender was like throwing gasoline on a smoldering fire. Once a bully thinks they have you on the ropes, they don't back off. They go for the knockout. And Karen went for it, with ruthless precision. Her next target was my little farm stand. It was nothing more than a simple wooden table I set up near my gate on weekends. I'd put out a dozen or so cartons of fresh eggs, bundles of herbs, and whatever vegetables were in surplus from my garden. It wasn't a big money maker, but it was my handshake with the community. I enjoyed the conversations with folks who stopped by. From young families to old-timers, one regular, a sweet elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, said my tomatoes were the only ones that tasted like the ones from her childhood garden. That compliment was worth more than any money I made. 2 weeks after her victory email, another official-looking letter arrived. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the County Code Enforcement Office. It was a formal notice that they had received a complaint regarding an unlicensed and unpermitted commercial enterprise operating at my address. The complaint, filed by a concerned resident, alleged that my farm stand violated county zoning ordinances because it was located within the residential overlay zone and constituted a business in a non-commercial area. I didn't need a detective to figure out who the concerned resident was. She'd been blocked at the front door, so she was sneaking around to the back, weaponizing a government agency to attack my livelihood. This wasn't about an unsightly truck anymore. This was a direct, calculated assault on my ability to exist and support myself on my own land. The anger I felt was no longer hot and boiling. It had become cold and hard, like steel. That night, I didn't sleep. I brewed a pot of coffee that was thick enough to stand a spoon in and sat at my computer. I was done retreating. I was going to war. I spent hours navigating the labyrinth of state legal websites, agricultural forums, and county documents. The language was dense, the regulations tangled. For a while, I felt a flicker of despair. Maybe she had me. Maybe there was some obscure rule I had missed. And then, around 3 a.m., my eyes burning and my head swimming with legalese, I found it. My shield. My sword. Legal trick 1. Right to farm laws. It was a whole section of the state code I'd never known existed. These are state-level statutes designed specifically to protect farmers and active agricultural operations from nuisance lawsuits or restrictive zoning ordinances brought by non-farming neighbors. Usually when new residential developments pop up next to long-standing farms, the law was beautiful in its simplicity. It explicitly stated that normal, accepted farming activities, which included the on-site direct-to-consumer sale of farm products, were legally protected. The one-sentence takeaway is this: as long as you are running a legitimate farm, the law protects your right to make a living on your own land from nuisance complaints. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through me, clearing the coffee-fueled fog from my brain. The next morning, I drove into town with a new sense of purpose. I went to a print shop and had the entire text of the state's right to farm law printed on a huge 3x5-foot vinyl banner. Bold, black, no-nonsense letters on a white background. I went back to the ranch and, with a deep sense of satisfaction, I hung that banner on 2 T-posts right behind my farm stand. It billowed in the breeze like a declaration of independence. Later that day, I went to the post office and sent a certified copy of the statute with the relevant passages highlighted to the County Code Enforcement Office. I sent another copy to the high-prized law firm that represented the Willow Creek HOA. The mini-twist of this loop came swiftly and sweetly. Just 1 week later, I received a short, formal letter from the county. It stated that after a review of the complaint and the submitted statutory documentation, the complaint was deemed without merit and had been dismissed. It was a victory, clean and decisive, but it was also a chilling warning. Karen had been stopped, but I knew she wouldn't stop for good. She had proven she was willing to go outside her own HOA, to use any tool, any agency, to come after me. This fight was bigger than I had realized, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that playing defense wasn't enough anymore. It was time for me to go on the offensive. The right to farm banner victory was a shot of morale, but it also planted a seed of deep curiosity. Why was Karen so obsessed? This wasn't normal HOA president behavior. This was a crusade. Why would she risk looking foolish by filing a complaint that was so easily dismissed? Why was she willing to go to such lengths, lying, filing false reports over a pickup truck and a vegetable stand? It had to be about more than just a view. It had to be about the land itself. Driven by a gut feeling that I was only seeing the tip of the iceberg, I decided to become a historian of my own property. I told Mark my plan. "I can't officially request documents for you, Dad," he said, "but I can tell you where the skeletons are buried." He suggested I start at the county records office, in the sub-basement where they kept the old physical plats and surveys. "The digital stuff is easy to search," he explained, "but sometimes the most important things are the ones nobody's bothered to scan." I spent the next 2 days in that sub-basement. It smelled of old paper, dust, and forgotten history. The lighting was dim, the silence broken only by the hum of an ancient HVAC system. I was helped by a clerk named Gloria, a woman who had worked there for 40 years and knew the filing system better than her own kitchen. She seemed to enjoy the challenge, guiding me through thick ledger books and long-forgotten filing cabinets. I pored over brittle, yellowed pages, my fingers stained with dust. I examined plat maps from the 90s, the 80s, working my way backward through the development of the area. It felt like peeling back layers of time. And then, late on the second day, Gloria wheeled out a cart with a collection of oversized cardboard tubes. "These are the original township surveys from before the big developments," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Real treasures." In one of those tubes, I found it. The original survey plat for the entire area, hand-drawn on linen paper in 1978. It was a work of art, with elegant looping script and precise hand-drawn lines. I carefully unrolled it on a large slanted table. My heart pounded as I traced the boundaries. There was my property, clearly delineated, and there was no residential overlay zone. Not a hint of it, not a note, not a line, not a whisper to suggest a piece of my land belonged to anyone else. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The game-changing truth was a small, folded piece of onion skin paper clipped to the back of the map. It was a handwritten memo from the county surveyor at the time, a man named Arthur Jensen. The ink was faded, but under the bright desk lamp, the words were perfectly clear. It read, June 12, 1978, memo to file. Representative from Horizon Properties requested an adjustment to the boundary line on the copied plat to be filed with the council to streamline future zoning applications. Be it noted for the record, however, that no legal transfer of title, no easement, and no official subdivision of this agricultural parcel, tax ID 751B, was ever executed or recorded. Original boundary as depicted on this master plat remains the sole legal boundary. I read it 3 times, my breath caught in my chest, and then it all crashed into place with the force of a physical blow. The ROSI was a complete and utter fabrication, a deliberate, calculated fraud. Horizon Properties, the developer of Willow Creek, had knowingly submitted a doctored map to the county to get their project approved, likely to inflate the value of their lots by implying they controlled a buffer zone. But they had never, ever, legally acquired the land. It was, and always had been, mine. Karen wasn't just enforcing a petty rule. She was an agent in a long-running real estate fraud, trying to exert authority over land her HOA had no legal claim to. Every letter, every fine, every threat, all of it was based on a fundamental lie. I took careful pictures of the map and the memo with my phone, my hands shaking slightly. I immediately sent them to Mark and to Sarge, a retired JAG lawyer from my VFW post. My text to Sarge was simple. I think I just found the whole damn war. To put it simply, Karen and her HOA were trying to boss me around on a piece of land they didn't own, and I now had the 50-year-old proof. The power dynamics of the entire conflict had just been turned completely upside down. I was no longer the victim. I was the man who held the truth, and that truth was a weapon. Discovering that memo was like finding a secret key to a locked room I didn't even know existed. But a key is useless if you don't know which door to open. I needed a plan. I needed a team. That night, my kitchen table, scarred with the history of countless meals and projects, became our command center. My war council assembled under the warm glow of a single overhead light. It was me, the man with the land and the proof. It was Mark, my son, my trusted advisor, who couldn't act as a cop but whose strategic mind was invaluable. And the third member, our heavy artillery, was Sarge. Sarge, real name Bill, was a retired defense attorney who had spent 20 years in the Army's Judge Advocate General's Corps, JAG. He was short, wiry, with a full head of silver hair cut in a crisp flat top. His blue eyes had a way of looking right through you, and he had a handshake that could crush walnuts. He hated 2 things in this world with a burning passion: injustice and bullies who use bureaucracy as a weapon. My case was a 5-course meal of both. I once saw a supply colonel try to court-martial a private for scuffing his boots, Sarge said after I laid out the evidence, a rare wolfish grin on his face. This is worse, and a hell of a lot more fun. He leaned over the photos of the map and memo. Okay, Jed, you didn't just find a smoking gun. You found the original blueprints for the gun factory. Now, here's how we dismantle it. First, he said, tapping a thick finger on the photo of the memo, we have to definitively link Karen to Horizon Properties. Her being the HOA president enforcing rules on their fraudulent map is too convenient. We need to prove she's not just an enthusiast, she's a beneficiary. That became Mark's and my mission. We spent the next several nights diving deep into the digital rabbit hole of public business records. Sarge acted as our guide, showing us how to navigate the databases. Financial/legal trick 2, following the money through LLCs. It's like pulling on a loose thread on a cheap sweater, Sarge explained. Big companies hide ownership through layers of limited liability companies. You use the state business registry to find the registered agent and managing members of one LLC, and that often leads you to another parent LLC, and so on. You just keep pulling. The one-sentence takeaway is this: if you want to know who's really behind a business decision, you don't follow your gut, you follow the corporate filings. And we found it. After tracing a path through 2 shell companies, we hit pay dirt. The real estate firm Karen owned, Prestige Homes Realty, wasn't just the exclusive seller for Willow Creek. It was a wholly owned subsidiary of Horizon Holdings Group, which was the parent company of Horizon Properties. Karen wasn't just a power-tripping HOA president. She was a business partner, a soldier in their army, with a direct financial stake in expanding the HOA's control and ultimately the value of the land Horizon owned. "Ingo," Sarge said, rubbing his hands together when we showed him the flow chart we'd made. "Now we have conspiracy. The final piece is our own offensive weapon." He explained our ultimate move. Legal trick 3, preparing a quiet title action. "This isn't a lawsuit for damages, Jed," Sarge explained, his voice serious. "This is a clean, powerful legal action that asks a court to issue a final, binding judgment on who the rightful owner of a piece of property is. It effectively quiets all other claims. Once a judge rules in your favor, no one, not Karen, not the HOA, not Horizon Properties, can ever contest your ownership of that strip of land again." The one-sentence takeaway is this: a quiet title action is the legal equivalent of planting your flag on a hill and having a judge declare that no one can ever take it down. The plan was beautiful in its elegant simplicity. While Sarge began quietly drafting the lawsuit, my job was the hardest. I had to play the part of the defeated man. I had to let Karen believe she had won. On Sarge's advice, I kept my farm stand packed away. I avoided eye contact when I saw her SUV. I let the grass grow a little too long. We were setting a trap, and we needed the quarry to be arrogant, overconfident, and to walk right into it of her own free will. My performance as a beaten man was, apparently, quite convincing. Karen, emboldened by my silence and the disappearance of my farm stand, grew more arrogant. In her world, my lack of fight was a clear sign of surrender. She thought she'd finally broken the stubborn country vet. Now she wanted to deliver the coup de grace, to get a formal lien placed on my entire 50-acre property for the ever-growing, now $10,000 0-cents fine she'd manufactured. But to do that, even with a compliant HOA board, she needed a more substantial, official-looking justification than a truck that was no longer there. She knew the commercial enterprise complaint had failed spectacularly, so she pivoted to a different line of attack, one that was far more insidious and dangerous. One Thursday morning, I was in the barn mending a piece of tack when a White County truck with the Environmental Services logo on the door rumbled down my driveway. A man in a county-issue polo shirt and a weary expression got out. "Morning," he said, looking around as if he already knew this was a waste of time. "We received an anonymous tip reporting a possible septic tank failure on this property. The caller mentioned foul odors near the property line and was gravely concerned about potential groundwater contamination for the Willow Creek subdivision." This was a serious below-the-belt punch. A failed septic system is an environmental hazard, a nightmare of expensive repairs, massive fines, and potential court orders. This was Karen's new gambit, an invisible threat, difficult to disprove on the spot, designed to paint me as a public menace. But Karen didn't know we'd been wargaming her next move. Sarge had predicted this exact play. "When they can't get you on the rules, they'll try to get you on public safety," he'd said. "Environment, health, things that scare people and force the government to act." So on his advice, I had been proactive. 2 weeks earlier, I had paid out of my own pocket to hire a top-rated independent environmental testing company. They had performed a full diagnostic on my septic and drainage system, including dye tests and water sample analysis. The system wasn't just fine, it was, in their words, a textbook example of a properly maintained rural septic field. When the inspector leveled the anonymous accusation, I didn't get defensive. I just nodded, slowly, a look of weary understanding on my face. "I can understand the concern," I said calmly. "It's important to protect the groundwater. Please, come on in. I've just made a fresh pot of coffee." I sat him down at my kitchen table, the same table where our war council met, and placed a thick, professionally bound report in front of him. "This is a full inspection report and water quality analysis from EnviroSafe Consulting, conducted exactly 10 days ago. It includes the soil percolation tests, tank integrity report, and a certification that my system is fully sealed and functioning efficiently, well above current county standards." The inspector blinked. He picked up the report, his eyebrows rising as he flipped through the pages of data, charts, and official certifications. The suspicion on his face melted away, replaced by a look of profound annoyance. He'd been used. "Well, I'll be," he said, closing the binder and shaking his head. "I wish half the systems in this county were this well documented. Clearly, there's no issue here. I'm sorry to have wasted your time, sir." He stood, gave me a firm handshake, a gesture of respect and apology, and left, looking significantly more irritated than when he had arrived. The mini-twist in this loop was the deafening silence that followed. No triumphant letter from the HOA, no gloating email. Karen had fired her heaviest artillery, and the shell had turned out to be a dud, fizzling out against a defensive wall she never knew I'd built. I could almost feel her rage vibrating through the 200 yards that separated our homes. Her plan had been thwarted by a preparation she couldn't have anticipated. The silence told me she was seething, and maybe for the first time she was a little bit scared. And a scared bully is a dangerous one. I knew her next attack wouldn't be clever, it would be personal and ugly. When the quasi-legal and bureaucratic attacks had all failed, Karen resorted to the final grimiest weapon in the bully's arsenal: slander. If she couldn't beat me with rules or agencies, she would try to destroy my reputation and turn the entire community against me. The campaign was a masterclass in vicious subtlety. It wasn't written in emails or official letters. It was a poison dripped in whispers over manicured hedges, in veiled comments at Willow Creek Book Club meetings, and in concerned conversations in the aisles of the local grocery store. My friendly neighbor, Mary, the one who bought my eggs, was the one who told me, her face tight with disgust. "She's clever, Jed. Evil, but clever," Mary explained over the fence one afternoon. "She doesn't say anything outright. She'll start by saying something like, 'I'm just so worried about our neighbor over there. It must be so isolating, all alone on that big property.' Then she'll lower her voice, all confidential and full of fake sympathy. 'You know, these brave soldiers who come back from combat, the things they've seen, sometimes they're just not the same. I just hope he's getting the help he needs. I hear PTSD can be very unpredictable.'" Hearing those words felt like a physical blow. She had crossed a sacred line. She was taking my years of service, my pride, my identity, the very experiences that had shaped me, and twisting them into something ugly and threatening. She was trying to paint me not as a neighbor, but as a menace, an unstable, broken man who might snap at any moment, a threat to the safety of the children in her perfect, cookie-cutter neighborhood. A white-hot cold rage filled me, a fury so intense it felt calm. It was the kind of anger that precedes decisive, irreversible action. My first primal instinct was to storm over to her house and confront her, to let her see what a truly angry veteran looked like. But then Sarge's calm, gravelly voice echoed in my head. "Patience, soldier. Let the enemy expend their ammunition on an empty foxhole. Every lie she tells to a witness is another nail she hammers into her own coffin. Just document." So I did the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I swallowed my rage. I did nothing. My silent preparation this time wasn't an action. It was a disciplined inaction. I asked Mary and a couple of other neighbors I trusted to be my ears. They agreed without hesitation, disgusted by Karen's tactics. They made notes of who said what, when, and where. Meanwhile, Sarge and I amended our legal case. We added a new powerful section: defamation of character and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Each of Karen's whispered lies was a documented fact in our filing. The mini-twist of this final loop was an unexpected gift from Karen herself. By making my veteran status the focus of her attack, she had fundamentally changed the narrative. This was no longer just a property dispute between a farmer and an HOA president. She had made it about a veteran being harassed and slandered in the very country he had served. "She's a fool, Jed," Sarge had said with a grim smile. "She thinks she's isolating you, but she's just handed us a flag to wave in front of a jury. There's nothing an American jury hates more than a rich bully picking on a soldier." Karen thought she was digging a hole for me. In reality, she was digging her own, and I was quietly standing by, ready to hand her the shovel for the last few feet. Her grand finale was set to be the HOA annual meeting, where she planned to publicly demand the lien on my property. It would be her stage, and it would be the setting for her spectacular downfall. The Willow Creek Estates Community Clubhouse had the sterile smell of floor wax and the faint, cloying scent of air freshener. The room was filled with about 50 residents, a sea of pastel polo shirts and expensive-looking casual wear, all perched on uncomfortable folding chairs. The air was thick with a mixture of boredom and anticipation. This was the big event of their year, the annual meeting, and Karen, as president, was in her absolute element. She stood at a small lectern, draped with an HOA banner, wearing a royal blue power suit. She looked like a minor queen holding court, and these were her loyal subjects. Sarge and I took seats in the back row, a pair of crows in a flock of doves. I was in a clean denim shirt and my best jeans. Sarge wore an old but neatly pressed tweed jacket. We were silent, observing, two ghosts at the feast. People would glance back at us, then quickly look away, whispering to their neighbors. After a mind-numbing drone-a-thon about the budget for planting seasonal pansies and a heated debate over the approved color for mailbox flags, Karen cleared her throat, signaling the main event. And finally, she said, her voice dripping with manufactured solemnity, we come to the important item of new business, specifically the ongoing compliance issue with Lot 1, adjacent to our community. A ripple of movement went through the room as all eyes turned to me. I could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, some hostile, some merely indifferent. I met them all with a calm, steady gaze. Karen launched into her prepared speech, a masterpiece of self-aggrandizing nonsense. She spoke of her solemn duty to uphold community standards, of the importance of protecting our shared property values, and of the HOA's tireless good faith efforts to resolve the issue. She then clicked a button and a spreadsheet appeared on the projector screen behind her. My name was at the top and next to it a single, blood-red number. $10,000, 0 cents. After months of attempting to resolve this matter amicably, she lied with the smooth confidence of a seasoned performer, the owner of this lot has steadfastly refused to cooperate. Therefore, the Board of Directors regretfully recommend that the HOA vote to authorize our legal counsel to proceed with placing a formal property lien on this individual's real estate. A tense, expectant silence fell over the room. This was it, her moment of ultimate triumph. That's when Sarge and I stood up. "Excuse the interruption, Madam President," Sarge said. His voice, though not loud, was a gravelly baritone that cut through the silence and commanded attention. "My client, Mr. Jedediah Stone, would like to present some information that is directly relevant to this proposed vote." Karen's face tightened. She looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon, but she couldn't publicly refuse without looking like a tyrant. "You have 5 minutes," she snapped, her voice sharp with irritation. I walked to the front of the room, but I didn't approach the lectern. I stood on the floor, on the same level as the residents. I connected my laptop to the projector. "Folks," I began, my voice calm and even, "thank you for your time. This isn't about my truck." The first image flashed on the screen, replacing her spreadsheet. It was the crystal-clear photo of the original 1978 survey plat. "This is the legal boundary of my farm, as recorded by this county for nearly 50 years. As you can all clearly see, there is no such thing as a residential overlay zone. It does not exist." A collective gasp went through the crowd. People started murmuring, turning to their neighbors. The next slide. It was the simple flowchart we had made, connecting Horizon Properties to Horizon Holdings Group to Karen's own Prestige Homes Realty. "And this," I said, pointing, "is the real reason Mrs. Carroll here is so interested in that land. Her real estate company is a direct subsidiary of the same corporation that developed Willow Creek. They all stand to benefit financially from controlling more land." The murmuring grew into a low roar of shock and confusion. People were turning to stare openly at Karen now, their expressions shifting from support to suspicion. Her face was beginning to lose its color. I continued, clicking through the evidence. The dismissed county complaint, the report from the environmental inspector, proving the septic tank call was a baseless lie. Finally, the sworn, notarized affidavits from several of her own neighbors, detailing her campaign to slander me as an unstable veteran. I switched off the projector and turned to face Karen directly. The room was dead silent. I didn't need to raise my voice. It was cold as a January wind. "Ma'am," I said, locking eyes with her, "you're not trying to protect community aesthetics. You're trying to commit real estate fraud. You've used lies, harassment, and slander to bully a veteran, attempting to seize land that doesn't belong to you, all to increase the value of the properties your parent company sells. Where I come from, We have a simpler word for that. Theft. The silence was shattered by Karen's own shriek. Her composure had completely disintegrated, revealing the raw panic beneath. "Security, call the police," she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This man is creating a disturbance. He's slandering me. Get him out of here." And right on cue, as if summoned by the gods of dramatic irony, the double doors at the back of the clubhouse swung open. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped inside. Leading them was a man in the crisp, authoritative uniform of the county sheriff. It was Mark. He didn't look at me. His gaze was professional, unwavering, and fixed solely on the woman at the lectern. He strode down the center aisle, his boots making a steady, resolute sound on the polished floor. He stopped directly in front of the stage, the entire room holding its breath. "Ma'am," Mark said, his voice calm but carrying the full weight of the law. "I'm Sheriff Mark Stone. We're not here about my father. We're here about you." He held up a folded legal document. "We have a formal criminal complaint supported by considerable evidence regarding conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, filing false reports to a government agency, and witness-attested harassment. I believe you're the one creating a disturbance. Please come with us." The entire room was silent as the 2 deputies walked onto the low stage and politely, but firmly, escorted a stunned, speechless Karen whose face had gone the color of ash out of her own throne room. The reign was over. Karen's downfall was as swift and total as her reign had been petty and tyrannical. The sheriff's investigation, spurred by our evidence, unraveled the entire fraudulent enterprise of Horizon Properties. A local investigative reporter got a hold of the story, and the resulting front-page exposé, titled HOA Tyranny or Corporate Conspiracy, was devastating, facing criminal charges and a massive civil lawsuit from me. That Sarge had filed the morning after the meeting, Horizon Properties and Karen chose to settle rather than face a public trial. The settlement was substantial. Karen lost her real estate license, was forced to resign from the HOA in disgrace, and her for sale sign went up within a week. She vanished from Willow Creek as quickly as she had appeared. The residential overlay zone was officially declared legally void and expunged from all county records. My property lines were reaffirmed, now protected by a court-ordered quiet title. The war was over. I had won. But as the dust settled and the quiet returned to my 50 acres, I didn't feel the triumphant elation I expected. I just felt tired. And I realized the real victory wasn't in defeating Karen. That was just weed control. The real victory would be in what I chose to plant in the now barren soil. The settlement provided a significant sum of money. I could have bought a new fleet of tractors, taken a trip around the world, or just lived comfortably for the rest of my life. But every time I looked at that 1-acre strip of land along the road, the battlefield, I knew it had to be something more. I refused to let it remain a monument to conflict. I wanted to turn it into a testament to community. That's when the idea for the Jedediah's Community Garden and Agricultural Scholarship Fund was born. I spent that entire fall working the land, not with anger, but with purpose. I tilled the soil, enriching it with compost from my own farm. I laid out dozens of neat, raised garden beds. Then I sent out a simple, 1-page flyer to every single mailbox in the area, both my old rural neighbors and the residents of Willow Creek. The flyer had a simple invitation: come grow with us. At first, only a few people came, mostly my existing friends. But then, a couple from Willow Creek, the ones who had been witnesses for me, showed up with their kids. Then another family. They came, a little shy at first, but soon they were talking, sharing gardening tips, and laughing together under the autumn sun. I watched as a woman who I'd seen nodding along at Karen's meetings sheepishly asked my advice on how to deal with squash bug. I showed her. We became friends. The place that had once been a battleground was now a place of life. Kids from the McMansions ran chasing butterflies through rows of vegetables, their laughter mixing with the quiet conversation of retirees pulling weeds. We grew tomatoes, cucumbers, kale, and towering sunflowers. We built a community, one seedling at a time. A portion of the proceeds from the produce we sold, combined with a large chunk of my settlement money, went into the scholarship fund. Last year we awarded our first full-ride scholarship to a brilliant young woman from the local high school, the daughter of a farmhand, to study sustainable agriculture at the state university. Last week I saw her working in the garden, showing a group of kids how to pollinate corn. One recent summer evening, Mark came by and we stood together, looking out over the garden as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air smelled of damp earth and ripe tomatoes. "You know, Dad," he said quietly, "for a man who just wanted to be left alone, you ended up bringing a whole lot of people together." I put my arm around his broad shoulders. "I guess the best way to find peace isn't to build a wall," I said. "It's to plant a garden so big everyone feels welcome in it." The peace I was looking for when I bought this land, I finally found it. It wasn't in the silence of solitude. It was in the gentle hum of a community working together. It wasn't in winning a fight, but in healing what the fight had broken. Next time, maybe I'll tell you about how we dealt with the out-of-state mining company that tried to steal the whole valley's water supply. But that's a story for another day. If you have ever had a nightmare experience with an HOA or any other abuse of power, share your story in the comments below. Remember, you are not alone, and your voice matters. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story of justice served. Thanks for listening.